The Johnson family, Marcus, his wife Elena, and their two children, 10-year-old Ava and 7-year-old Liam, were excited about their upcoming vacation. After months of planning, they were finally boarding a flight to Miami for a much-needed break from their busy lives. The tickets had been booked well in advance, and the family was seated comfortably in business class, ready to enjoy the perks that came with it: wider seats, better service, and an overall smoother experience. As they walked down the aisle toward their assigned seats, Marcus couldn't help but notice how some members of the cabin crew exchanged quick glances when they saw the family approach. At first, he brushed it off as just another day at the airport. After all, airports could be chaotic places where everyone seemed stressed or distracted. But something about those looks lingered in his mind. They weren't friendly or welcoming. They felt judgmental. When Marcus tried to stow their carry-on luggage in the overhead compartment, one of the flight attendants sighed loudly enough for him to hear. "Can I assist you?" she asked. Her tone clipped, almost annoyed. Marcus smiled politely and shook his head. "No, thank you. I've got it," he replied, making sure to keep his voice calm and composed. He didn't want to start the trip on a bad note, but he couldn't ignore the fact that her attitude felt unnecessarily cold. Elena, sitting beside him, noticed too. She gave him a small, reassuring smile, silently telling him not to let it bother him. For now, they focused on settling into their seats. Ava plugged her headphones into her tablet, eager to watch cartoons during the flight, while Liam fidgeted with his toy airplane, pretending it was flying through imaginary clouds. Despite the minor hiccup earlier, things seemed to be calming down. But then came more subtle signs of discomfort. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Elena pressed the call button near her seat to ask for assistance with her seatbelt, which seemed stuck. When the same attendant who had sighed earlier arrived, she didn't greet Elena with a smile or even basic courtesy. Instead, she muttered, "It's pretty straightforward," before fixing the issue and walking away without another word. Marcus leaned over to whisper to Elena, "Did you catch that?" His wife nodded, her expression tight. "Yeah, I did. Weird vibe." Neither of them wanted to jump to conclusions, but the pattern was becoming hard to ignore. Other passengers around them also picked up on the tension. A middle-aged woman, seated across the aisle, shot the couple a sympathetic glance, while a businessman nearby raised an eyebrow at the interaction. Things only grew stranger as the plane taxied down the runway. Once airborne, the flight attendants began distributing drinks and snacks. When Marcus requested water for himself and orange juice for Liam, the attendant paused briefly before handing over the beverages. There was no smile, no polite, "Here you go," or "Enjoy your flight." It was as if serving them was a chore rather than part of her job description. Meanwhile, Elena had pre-booked a vegetarian meal option weeks ago, knowing full well that airlines sometimes ran out of special requests if they weren't reserved ahead of time. Yet when she asked for her meal, the response was curt. "Sorry, we don't have anything like that today." Frustrated but trying to stay composed, Elena replied, "That's odd because I confirmed this reservation multiple times. Are you sure?" The attendant shrugged nonchalantly. "I'm just telling you what's available. Maybe there was a mix-up." What made matters worse was that moments later, another passenger in economy class received a vegetarian meal identical to the one Elena had ordered. She spotted it being handed over and felt a surge of anger bubbling inside her. Was this really happening? Had they been singled out simply because of the color of their skin? By now, Ava and Liam had stopped watching cartoons and playing with toys. They sensed the shift in energy around them. "Why does that lady keep looking at us funny, Mommy?" Ava whispered, tugging at Elena's sleeve. Elena forced a smile and hugged her daughter close. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Everything's fine," she reassured her, though deep down she wasn't so sure. Other passengers continued observing the situation unfold. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting awkwardly in their seats. Others outright stared, unable to comprehend why the Johnsons were being treated differently. Even Liam, who was usually oblivious to such subtleties, turned to his dad and said, "Daddy, why is everyone mad at us?" Marcus hesitated, unsure how to explain something he barely understood himself. "They're not mad at us, buddy. Sometimes people make mistakes and we just have to remind them to do better." Despite the growing unease, Marcus and Elena remained dignified. They refused to let anyone dampen their spirits completely. Still, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on them. This wasn't just about poor customer service, it went deeper than that. Every ignored request, every dismissive look, every sigh added fuel to the fire of indignity burning within them. Little did the cabin crew know, their actions were setting the stage for a revelation that would leave everyone aboard speechless. For now, though, the Johnsons sat quietly, biding their time, waiting to see how far this mistreatment would go, and deciding how best to respond. As the plane soared higher into the sky, the tension aboard grew thicker with each passing minute. The initial excitement of the Johnson family's vacation had been replaced by a heavy cloud of discomfort. Marcus and Elena exchanged glances, silently communicating their growing unease. They were used to encountering prejudice in subtle forms, but this situation felt different, more deliberate, more personal. The constant dismissive behavior from the cabin crew wasn't just frustrating, it was humiliating. Elena tried her best to focus on calming Liam, who had grown restless after finishing his orange juice. He started playing with the empty cup, tossing it lightly into the air and catching it. But when he missed one toss and the cup rolled under the seat in front of them, the same flight attendant who had earlier sighed at Marcus appeared almost instantly. She bent down stiffly to retrieve it, handing it back without a word. Her expression made it clear that even this small act of service annoyed her. "Thank you," Elena said warmly, hoping to break through the icy demeanor. The attendant nodded, curtly, and walked away without acknowledging her gratitude. Ava, sitting beside her mom, leaned over and whispered, "Why is she being so mean? Did we do something wrong?" Elena hesitated, unsure how to explain what was happening without making her children feel unwelcome or judged. Finally, she settled on a simple answer. "No, sweetheart. We didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people make assumptions about others based on how they look or dress, and those assumptions aren't always fair." Ava frowned, clearly confused. "But isn't that silly? We're just regular people trying to go on vacation." "You're absolutely right," Elena replied softly, brushing a strand of hair behind Ava's ear. "It is silly, and it's also unfair. But unfortunately, some people don't realize how hurtful their actions can be." While Elena comforted her daughter, Marcus decided it was time to address the issue directly. He pressed the call button near his seat, determined to speak with someone about the ongoing mistreatment. When the head flight attendant, a tall woman with sharp features and an equally sharp tone, approached, Marcus greeted her politely. "Hi, I wanted to bring something to your attention," he began calmly. "We've noticed a pattern of dismissive behavior from certain members of your team since we boarded. For example, my wife pre-booked a vegetarian meal, which hasn't been provided despite confirmation emails, and there have been several other instances where we've felt singled out. Could you help us understand what's going on?" The head flight attendant blinked once, then twice, as if processing whether Marcus was serious. Then, with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, she responded, "Sir, I assure you that our staff treats all passengers equally. If there has been any misunderstanding, I apologize. However, I must remind you that flying can sometimes be unpredictable, and not everything goes according to plan." Her words dripped with insincerity, and Marcus could tell she wasn't taking him seriously. Still, he pressed on. "I appreciate the acknowledgement, but this isn't just about unpredictability. This feels intentional. My family deserves the same respect as anyone else on this flight." The attendant's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Of course, sir. Let me see what I can do about the vegetarian meal." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Marcus feeling more frustrated than before. Meanwhile, other passengers continued watching the unfolding drama. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats while others openly stared, unable to look away. A young couple seated nearby exchanged concerned glances, whispering quietly to each other. An elderly man in the row ahead shook his head disapprovingly, muttering something under his breath about rudeness and bad manners. Even Liam, who was usually oblivious to such subtleties, began picking up on the hostility. He tugged at Marcus's sleeve and asked, "Dad, why are they treating us like this? Are we bad flyers?" Marcus forced a reassuring smile, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. "Nobody, we're great flyers. Sometimes people make mistakes or forget to be kind. That doesn't mean we've done anything wrong." Despite his calm exterior, Marcus's patience was wearing thin. He glanced at Elena, who gave him a small nod, signaling that she agreed. They needed to take action. Sitting idly by and letting this mistreatment continue wasn't an option. The question was, how far were they willing to push back? Just then, another incident occurred that pushed tensions to a breaking point. While adjusting his seatbelt, Liam accidentally spilled a bit of water on the armrest. It wasn't much, just a few drops, but the same attendant who had retrieved the cup earlier swooped in immediately. Without offering assistance or even asking if everything was okay, she snapped, "Please try to be more careful next time. These seats are expensive to maintain." Liam's eyes widened in shock and tears welled up as he looked at his parents for reassurance. Elena wrapped an arm around him protectively, her jaw tightening. "Excuse me," she said firmly, addressing the attendant. "He's a child. Accidents happen. There's no need to embarrass him like that." The attendant blinked, seemingly caught off guard by Elena's directness. For a moment she looked as though she might argue, but instead, she simply muttered, "I'll get a towel," and hurried off. The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath during this exchange. Even the background hum of conversations and engine noise faded into silence. Everyone knew something significant was brewing, though no one could predict exactly what would happen next. As the minutes ticked by, Marcus leaned closer to Elena and whispered, "This has gone far enough. We need to say something, not just for us, but for everyone else who might face this kind of treatment in the future." Elena nodded, her resolve strengthening. "You're right. Enough is enough." What neither the cabin crew nor the other passengers realized yet was that the Johnsons weren't just ordinary travelers. Behind their composed exteriors lay a powerful truth, one that would soon turn the tables entirely. But for now, the family sat together, united in their decision to confront the injustice head-on. The stage was set for a confrontation that would leave everyone aboard reeling, and perhaps teach them a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. The tension in the cabin had reached a boiling point. Every dismissive glance, every curt response, and every unnecessary sigh from the cabin crew had piled up like heavy stones on the Johnson family's shoulders. Marcus and Elena exchanged one final look, a silent agreement that it was time to address the situation directly, no matter the consequences. They weren't just going to let this slide. Not anymore. Elena took a deep breath, steadying herself. She stood up slowly, her presence commanding attention even before she spoke. The movement caught the eyes of nearby passengers who turned their heads curiously. Even the cabin crew, busy tidying up trays and refilling drinks, paused mid-task to see what was happening. The atmosphere shifted instantly, as if everyone knew something big was about to unfold. "Excuse me," Elena began, her voice calm but firm, carrying across the cabin. "I'd like to say something, and I think it's important for everyone here to hear it." Her words hung in the air, drawing immediate silence. Conversations stopped, movies were paused, and even the hum of the airplane engines seemed to fade into the background. All eyes were on Elena now, some filled with curiosity, others with apprehension. The head flight attendant, who had earlier dismissed Marcus's concerns so casually, stepped forward cautiously, clearly unsure of what to expect. "For most of this flight," Elena continued, her tone measured but laced with emotion, "my family and I have been treated poorly by members of your team. We've been ignored, judged, and spoken to in ways that are neither professional nor respectful. At first we thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding or bad timing. But after everything that's happened, the lack of our pre-booked meal, the dismissive attitudes, the unnecessary comments, It's clear that this isn't accidental. This is intentional. She paused, letting her words sink in. Gasps rippled through the cabin as passengers processed what she was saying. Some nodded, sympathetically, while others whispered to their seatmates, piecing together the earlier interactions they had witnessed. The cabin crew looked increasingly uneasy, exchanging nervous glances among themselves. "But there's something you all should know," Elena added, her voice rising slightly, gaining strength. "You've treated us like we don't belong here, as if we're somehow less deserving of respect than anyone else on this plane. Well, let me remind you, we own this airline." The room erupted into stunned silence. For a moment, it felt like time froze. Passengers stared at Elena, then at Marcus, then back at the cabin crew, trying to process what they had just heard. Whispers broke out almost immediately, growing louder as the reality sank in. Heads turned toward the attendants, whose faces transformed from confusion to sheer panic. Marcus stood up beside Elena, his posture confident yet composed. He scanned the cabin, meeting the wide-eyed gazes of both passengers and crew. "Yes, it's true," he confirmed, addressing the entire plane. "My wife and I co-founded Skylink Airlines. We built this company from the ground up, with the goal of providing exceptional service to every single passenger, regardless of who they are or where they come from. That's why we're here today. Not as owners traveling in luxury, but as regular customers wanting to experience firsthand how our airline operates." His words hit like a thunderclap. The irony of the situation was impossible to ignore. Here was the very family being mistreated, not because of anything they had done, but because of assumptions based on bias. And they owned the entire operation. It was a twist no one saw coming. The head flight attendant, who had previously dismissed Marcus's complaint so flippantly, now looked utterly mortified. Her face flushed red and she stammered, "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I had no idea. Please forgive me. I assure you this is not reflective of our values as a company." "It's not just about forgiveness," Marcus replied evenly, cutting through her apology. "This is about accountability. If this is how my family is treated when we travel incognito, imagine how other passengers might feel when they encounter similar biases. What happens to someone who doesn't have the privilege of revealing ownership to shut down discriminatory behavior?" The question hung heavily in the air, forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable truths. The passengers murmured amongst themselves, some nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads in disbelief at the audacity of the crew's actions. One man seated near the front called out, "They're right. You can't treat people this way." Even the younger flight attendants, who hadn't been directly involved in the incidents, appeared visibly shaken. Their polished professionalism crumbled under the weight of guilt and embarrassment. A few cast apologetic looks toward the Johnsons, while others avoided eye contact altogether, staring at their shoes as if hoping to disappear. Elena, sensing the shift in energy, softened her tone slightly. "We didn't plan to reveal ourselves this way," she admitted. "But sometimes moments like these force us to take a stand. Our airline exists to serve everyone equally, to make flying an enjoyable experience for all. And if that mission is compromised by prejudice or negligence, then we need to fix it, immediately." Her words resonated deeply with the passengers, many of whom clapped softly in support. The applause started small but grew louder, spreading throughout the cabin until it became a unified show of solidarity. For the first time since boarding, the Johnsons felt truly seen, not as targets of discrimination, but as human beings worthy of dignity and respect. The head flight attendant, still reeling from the revelation, scrambled to regain control of the situation. "Please allow us to make amends," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "We'll ensure you receive everything you requested, including the vegetarian meal, and perhaps complimentary upgrades for your inconvenience." While her offer sounded sincere, it came across as hollow given the circumstances. Marcus raised a hand, signaling for her to stop. "Thank you for the gesture, but this isn't about free meals or upgrades. This is about recognizing the harm caused by your actions and ensuring it never happens again. When we land, there will be an investigation. Those responsible will face appropriate consequences." His statement sent a ripple of unease through the cabin crew, who now understood the gravity of their mistakes. But rather than dwell on punishment, Marcus emphasized the bigger picture. This is also an opportunity for growth, for all of us. Today we learned that even companies with good intentions can fall short. Tomorrow we'll work harder to live up to the standards we set for ourselves. By the time he finished speaking, the mood aboard the plane had transformed completely. What had begun as a tense, hostile environment now carried a sense of resolve, a shared understanding that change was necessary. Passengers who had initially felt awkward witnessing the mistreatment now felt empowered, knowing they had played a part in holding the crew accountable. As Elena sat back down beside Marcus, she reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. Their children, Ava and Liam, looked up at them with wide eyes, finally understanding why their parents had spoken up. "Did we win, Mommy?" Liam asked quietly. Elena smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. We won, not just for us, but for everyone who deserves to be treated fairly." And with that, the Johnsons settled back into their seats, knowing they had turned a painful experience into a powerful lesson. The rest of the flight passed in relative peace, though the impact of their revelation would linger long after the plane touched down in Miami. The revelation that the Johnson family-owned Skylink Airlines had transformed the atmosphere aboard the plane from one of tension and hostility to a mix of shock, embarrassment, and quiet reflection. The cabin crew, once dismissive and aloof, now scrambled to make amends, their earlier arrogance replaced by frantic attempts to salvage the situation. Passengers, too, were caught in the whirlwind of emotions, some sympathetic toward the Johnsons, others critical of the crew's behavior, and a few simply marveling at the unexpected twist. As the plane continued its journey toward Miami, Marcus took charge of addressing the immediate aftermath. Standing tall in the aisle, he addressed the cabin once more, his voice calm but authoritative. "Thank you for your understanding," he began, nodding toward the passengers who had clapped in support earlier. "What happened here today is unacceptable, not just as customers, but as human beings. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their background or status." His words resonated deeply with the passengers, many of whom nodded in agreement. A middle-aged woman seated near the front called out, "You're absolutely right. This kind of behavior has no place on any flight." Others murmured their approval, creating a sense of solidarity among the travelers. For the first time since boarding, the Johnsons felt like they weren't alone in this fight. Turning his attention to the cabin crew, Marcus softened his tone slightly, but remained firm. "I want to speak directly to the team responsible for today's service. Your actions do not reflect the values we've worked so hard to build into Skylink Airlines. Our mission is to provide exceptional care to every passenger, without exception. When that promise is broken, it damages not only our reputation, but also the trust people place in us." The head flight attendant, still visibly shaken, stepped forward hesitantly. Her usual polished demeanor was gone, replaced by genuine remorse. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, please accept my sincerest apologies," she said, her voice trembling. "This is not how we operate, and I assure you, steps will be taken to ensure this never happens again." Marcus nodded slowly, acknowledging her apology, but making it clear that words alone wouldn't suffice. Apologies are important, yes, but accountability is crucial. Upon landing, there will be a thorough investigation into today's events. Those involved will face appropriate consequences, whether that means additional training, reassignment, or other measures. We cannot afford to let bias or negligence tarnish what we've built. His declaration sent a ripple of unease through the cabin crew, who exchanged nervous glances. Some looked genuinely contrite, while others appeared fearful of losing their jobs. But Marcus wasn't interested in assigning blame solely for punishment's sake. He wanted to use this moment as an opportunity for growth. Addressing the entire cabin, he continued, "To our valued passengers, I want to thank you for bearing witness to this incident. Your presence here today reminds us that accountability matters, not just within companies but within society as a whole. We owe it to ourselves and to each other to call out injustice when we see it, and to demand better. The passengers responded with another round of applause, this time louder and more heartfelt. Even those who had initially stayed silent now joined in, recognizing the importance of standing up against discrimination. It was a powerful reminder that change often begins with collective action. Elena, sitting beside Marcus, added her thoughts. "We didn't plan for this day to unfold the way it did," she admitted, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. Noting the nods of agreement around her, she continued, "But sometimes life gives us moments that force us to confront uncomfortable truths. Today, we learned that even the best intentions can fall short if we aren't vigilant. Moving forward, we'll work harder to ensure that every passenger feels welcome and respected when they choose to fly with us." Her sincerity struck a chord with everyone aboard. The elderly man who had earlier muttered disapprovingly about the crew's rudeness raised his hand slightly, catching Elena's attention. "Ma'am," he said, his voice gravelly but warm, "you and your husband are setting a fine example. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Elena smiled gratefully, touched by his words. "Thank you," she replied softly. "That means a lot to us." Meanwhile, the cabin crew attempted to make amends in small but meaningful ways. The vegetarian meal Elena had requested was finally delivered, along with a handwritten note of apology from the head flight attendant. Drinks and snacks were offered generously to all passengers, though the gestures felt somewhat hollow given the circumstances. Still, the effort signaled a shift in attitude, a recognition that the crew's behavior needed to change starting immediately. As the plane descended toward Miami International Airport, the mood aboard shifted once again. Gone was the hostility and tension that had dominated much of the flight. In its place was a sense of resolution, a shared understanding that something significant had occurred and that lessons had been learned. The Johnsons, though exhausted from the ordeal, felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had turned a painful experience into an opportunity to drive meaningful change, not just within their airline, but within themselves as well. When the plane finally touched down and taxied to the gate, the passengers erupted into spontaneous applause, a gesture of gratitude and support for the Johnsons. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to disembark, several travelers approached the family to express their admiration. "You handled that beautifully," one woman said, shaking Marcus's hand. "Thank you for standing up for what's right." Another man holding his young daughter's hand added, "My kids are watching and learning from moments like these. Thank you for showing them that speaking up matters." Marcus and Elena accepted the compliments graciously, knowing that the real work lay ahead. Once off the plane, they wasted no time contacting Skylink's corporate offices to initiate the promised investigation. Within hours, news of the incident spread throughout the company, prompting urgent discussions about diversity training, anti-bias workshops, and stricter accountability measures for staff at every level. For the Johnsons, the experience served as both a wake-up call and a catalyst for transformation. They vowed to use their influence not only to improve customer service but also to advocate for equity and inclusion across the aviation industry. Their decision to travel incognito had revealed flaws in their system, but it had also highlighted their ability to lead by example. As they walked through the airport terminal together, hand in hand, the Johnsons reflected on the day's events. Though challenging, the experience had strengthened their resolve to create a world where everyone could feel valued and respected, whether in the skies or on the ground. And as they stepped into the bright Florida sunshine, ready to begin their vacation, they knew they had already made a difference. The wheels of change began turning almost immediately after the Johnson family disembarked from their ill-fated flight. News of the incident traveled quickly within Skylink Airline's corporate offices, sparking a wave of introspection and urgency among executives and employees alike. Marcus and Elena wasted no time in addressing the issue head-on, determined to turn this painful experience into an opportunity for meaningful reform, not just within their company, but across the aviation industry as a whole. Within 48 hours of landing in Miami, Skylink issued a public statement acknowledging the incident. The press release was concise yet heartfelt, emphasizing the company's commitment to fairness and inclusion. At Skylink Airlines, we strive to provide exceptional service to every passenger, regardless of race, background, or identity, the statement read. However, recent events have highlighted areas where we have fallen short of that promise. We take full responsibility for these failures and are committed to implementing immediate changes to ensure they do not happen again. The announcement was met with widespread media coverage, drawing attention not only to the specific incident, but also to broader issues of bias and discrimination in air travel. Journalists praised the Johnsons for their courage in speaking out, while social media buzzed with discussions about accountability and equality. Hashtags like #TowerFlyWithRespect and accountability in action trended globally, amplifying the conversation far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. Back at Skylink headquarters, Marcus and Elena spearheaded a series of initiatives aimed at fostering a more inclusive culture. First on their agenda was mandatory diversity training for all employees, from cabin crew members to senior management. These sessions were designed not as punitive measures, but as educational tools to help staff recognize unconscious biases and develop empathy for passengers from diverse backgrounds. Expert facilitators led workshops that included role-playing scenarios, open dialogues, and real-world case studies, ensuring that participants left with actionable insights rather than empty platitudes. In addition to training programs, the UO Johnsons introduced stricter accountability measures for misconduct. A new hotline was established, allowing passengers to report instances of discrimination or poor treatment anonymously. Reports would be reviewed by an independent oversight committee, ensuring impartiality and transparency. Employees found guilty of discriminatory behavior faced consequences ranging from suspension to termination, depending on the severity of the offense. This zero-tolerance policy sent a clear message. Prejudice had no place in Skylink's operations, but the Johnsons didn't stop there. Recognizing the need for systemic change, they launched a groundbreaking initiative called Fly with Respect. The program focused on 3 key pillars: equitable treatment for all passengers, enhanced customer service protocols, and community outreach efforts to engage underrepresented groups. As part of the initiative, Skylink partnered with advocacy organizations to host panel discussions, webinars, and mentorship programs aimed at promoting diversity in the aviation industry. One particularly impactful aspect of Fly with Respect was its emphasis on storytelling. Passengers who had experienced discrimination during flights were invited to share their stories anonymously through Skylink's website. These narratives were compiled into a digital archive, which served as both a resource for training and a reminder of the human impact of biased behavior. By centering real-life experiences, the initiative ensured that employees understood the stakes involved and the importance of treating every passenger with dignity. The response to these efforts was overwhelmingly positive. Customers praised Skylink for taking swift and decisive action, while industry analysts lauded the company for setting a new standard for accountability. Competitors took note, with several airlines announcing similar reforms in the months that followed. The ripple effect extended beyond aviation, inspiring businesses in other sectors to reevaluate their own practices and commit to greater inclusivity. For the Johnson family, however, the work wasn't done. They knew that true progress required sustained effort and vigilance. Over the next few months, Marcus and Elena traveled extensively, not as undercover passengers, but as ambassadors of change. They visited airports, attended conferences, and spoke at schools, sharing their story and urging others to join the movement for equity and respect. Their children, Ava and Liam, became unofficial spokespeople for the cause, often accompanying their parents to events and speaking candidly about their own experiences aboard the fateful flight. Through it all, the Johnsons remained grounded in their mission. Despite the accolades and recognition they received, they never lost sight of why they had spoken up in the first place: to create a world where everyone felt valued, respected, and safe. For Marcus, the turning point came during a school assembly where he addressed a group of middle school students. One boy raised his hand and asked, "What if I see someone being treated unfairly? What should I do?" Marcus smiled warmly, recalling his own decision to confront the cabin crew mid-flight. "Speak up," he said simply. "Use your voice. Even if it feels scary or uncomfortable, standing up for what's right is always worth it. You might not see the impact right away, but trust me, it matters." Elena echoed this sentiment during a panel discussion hosted by a prominent civil rights organization. When asked how she maintained her composure during such a challenging situation, she replied, "It's not easy to stay calm when you're being treated unfairly. But anger without purpose doesn't solve anything. What helped me was focusing on the bigger picture, the idea that our actions could inspire change. That gave me strength." By the end of the year, Skylink Airlines had undergone a remarkable transformation. Passenger satisfaction ratings soared, employee morale improved, and the company earned numerous awards for its commitment to diversity and inclusion. Yet the most profound impact was felt not in numbers or accolades, but in the countless lives touched by the Johnsons' courage and determination. Looking back on the journey, Marcus and Elena reflected on the lessons they had learned, not just about running a business, but about humanity itself. They realized that while owning a successful airline brought privileges, it also carried responsibilities. True leadership meant using that influence to uplift others, to challenge injustice, and to pave the way for a better future. As they sat together one evening, watching the sunset over Miami Beach, Marcus turned to Elena and said, "You know, I never thought a single flight could change so much." Elena smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Neither did I. But maybe that's the point. Sometimes the smallest moments lead to the biggest transformations."